Smacking is legal in Northern Ireland if it's deemed to be reasonable. But Scotland will ban all forms of corporal punishment from November this year, and Wales will introduce similar legislation in 2022. So, what about here? Should we follow suit? I've been talking to writer and commentator Maeve O'Lynn. Maeve's a mother of 3 young children. I've also been talking to Jamie Gillies. He's from the Be Reasonable campaign group, which lobbied to stop the Welsh and Scottish bans on smacking. I first asked Maeve if she thought there were ever any grounds for smacking.
I think to begin with, it's important to acknowledge that smacking is a sliding scale. It really does vary in degrees of severity. Parents aren't perfect. It is a demanding, stressful, round-the-clock job. And, it can also be a really difficult thing to swallow that politicians and lawyers are better placed to make decisions on how we raise our children than we are as parents. But at the end of the day, I just don't think that smacking is really ever justified, and I don't think it means that we shouldn't have legislation against it.
Martin Freeman said that he was at the end of his rope, and when he felt impatient, he smacked his children. I mean, have you ever done it yourself, Maeve, in a moment?
I think, unfortunately, smacking is often used whenever a parent has lost their temper, so it is a really particularly risky strategy. When you've lost your temper, you've lost the argument. I would say, as well as being a mum of 3, I'm also a teacher, and we don't accept teachers hitting our kids, and we don't condone kids hitting each other. So I don't know why we would allow or accept a different standard at home.
Jamie, what's your view on this, and indeed the campaign group Be Reasonable's view on this?
Well, I must say I do agree with a lot of what Maeve says, in terms of parents losing their temper. That's a very bad thing. But I suppose this debate is specifically about a defence in the law, the reasonable chastisement defence, and the wording of that allows parents to use very mild, quote, reasonable discipline with their children. So something like a tap on the hand or in the back of the legs is acceptable and lawful. But anything more than that, anything that causes more than a transitory reddening of the skin, is by definition already criminal. So removing the defence will open up mums and dads, loving mums and dads, potentially to prosecution for using reasonable chastisement with their children. And we as a campaign think that's too far because, the negative impact of a criminal conviction on parents and families more generally is very bad indeed. And is it really proportionate? Is it really necessary to criminalise parents who use smacking with their children? We don't think so. There are instances where parents do use physical discipline with their children in a controlled, in a calm manner. Something that happened to me as a child. And if a mum's taking a child aside and tapping her on the hand and saying something's wrong, that parent is not an abuser. That parent is not somebody who should be pursued and feel the full force of the criminal law. And so we think it's a pretty irresponsible move just to remove a defence from the law, which will lead to good, decent, loving parents potentially being criminalised.
Yes, it has to be said, Maeve, at the moment, the law says that if the smack is deemed reasonable, in Northern Ireland anyway, this is legal. And that would seem a very rational situation for a lot of people listening to this programme.
Mm-hmm.
Maeve?
It's a really difficult one because obviously what happens in the context of your own home, it's very often only the parents and the children who are there. So it would be very difficult to make a call as to whether it's being used in a reasonable and an appropriate way. And I think the idea of just taking smacking away and making it not reasonable in any context is probably safer for everybody involved.
You've got a moral issue here, Jamie. You've also got a practical issue. But some people believe it's wrong to smack or even cuff a child, maybe, to use another verb, a sort of gentle physical reprimand. And yet to try and legislate and to make a law practical, that is quite difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very difficult. There are questions about how it would be enforced. The state can't be in every single living room all the time spying on families. That's something nobody would want. But I think the point to make is that the law, as it stands, it's clear, it's very well balanced, it strongly prevents children from being abused or hit, it protects children from violence, but at the same time recognises that parents can have freedom to use very mild discipline with their kids. So it would be irresponsible to change the law in a way which could lead to an imbalance, to heavy-handed treatment of parents by the state, to coin a phrase. The status quo law has worked for many years. The police understand the law, the courts understand the law, and they're not agitating for the law to be changed. So if they think the law is clear and it works, there's really no reason to change it and risk negative outcomes for perfectly good families.
Would you say it is a more practical matter than that to apply the law, Maeve?
I think the phrase heavy-handed is an unfortunate one. I think it needs to be acknowledged, like, people are not born knowing how to manage challenging behaviour and to apply behaviour management strategies and positive reinforcement in the home. These are a skill set, and you learn them as a teacher. You
also sort of pass them down from what you got yourself, in a way. I mean, many parents who smack their children will have probably been smacked themselves at some stage in their childhood. They say it didn't do them any harm, and some say they're even grateful because it kept them out of getting into more serious trouble at an early age.
Sure.
And yeah, it's true, absolutely. People do pass down what they got at home, and maybe that is why it is so important to try and change what is normal in the home and take away any suggestion that aggression or physical contact is the best way to manage bad behaviour.
Can I just interject there? I think it's interesting that, Maeve, you're saying that, because it sounds to me like you're saying that we can't trust parents to be parents. Parents instinctively care and love their children and will seek to bring them up in the best way they see fit. And it's pretty patronising to say that all parents need to be taught how to parent by the state and giving lessons on positive parenting and how to manage their behaviour. The law is there for parents who do lose control and who are violent. The law is there to prosecute them. But for other parents, we need to trust people and give them the freedom to bring up their children, as they have been for generations, and trust that their instincts and their motives are right in the vast majority of cases.